Welcome everyone to the 5th installment in this virtual series for managing careers during a pandemic. So I'll be your host today. My name is Mohadeep Sinha. For those I haven't met, I'm a senior postdoc at Swinburne. I do data intensive astronomy and simulations and stuff like that. For this purpose, in this context, I was the past chair of the ECR chapter, and have been involved in organizing this workshop. Sarah Martel, who is the previous chair of the ECR chapter before me, will be the other moderator for this session. Just a heads up again, this session is being recorded, and we are hoping to put up this video on our YouTube channel, okay? So before we get started, we'll work with acknowledgement of country. I'll just read it through. In the spirit of reconciliation, the ASA ECR chapter acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This is obviously a work meeting, and it is covered by the ASA's code of conduct. I will read out the code of conduct just to make sure we are all on the same page. The ASA is committed to making ASA organized or sponsored or supported meetings, events, and publications inclusive, productive, and enjoyable for everyone, regardless of age, caring responsibilities, cultural diversity, disability, gender, indigeneity, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical appearance, or religion. Okay? Basically, be nice. Don't be argumentative or any of them. If you want to look at the actual code of conduct, the link is below. So today's session, today is the 5th installment, and the goal for this series has been to show that as astronomers, we have the skills that lets us do a wide variety of jobs. Particularly, the motivation behind this series was that the pandemic really dropped the total number of available jobs. And of course, ECRs, particularly those who are in vulnerable positions of not having a contract or having a contract that expires soon, are rightfully feeling lots of anxiety. So one of the ways that we at the ECR chapter are hoping to help is by providing you with a series of, with the voices of experience on how others have navigated different careers. Today's thing is about jobs in data science, and our panel is from Anthea, Jacob, Richard, and Suk Yee. We'll come to the panel in a second. The ways you can interact with us today is you can just ask a question if you have directly in the chat box, or if you raise your hand in the participant list, so you can raise that. Sarah and we will be monitoring the chat and the participant list, and we will try to ask the questions as relevant. If you don't want to ask your question, you want to ask a question anonymously, just send a private message to either Sarah or me, and we will ask it anonymously. It's fine. So then let's get started with our career. So first, what I would like to do is have each of our panel members introduce themselves, just a minute or two in who they are, where you work, what your trajectory has been. I'll go in the sequence that's on the slide: Anthea, Jacob, Richard, and Suk Yee. Anthea, will you please go first?
Yeah, of course. Hi, for those who don't know me, my name is Anthea King. I did my PhD at UQ and University of Copenhagen. I did a joint PhD, and then I moved on and did a postdoc at University of Melbourne for 3 years before making the decision to change careers. At that stage, I started applying for jobs and got a job actually pretty quickly at one of Wesfarmers companies. So it's effectively a holding company within a holding company called Wesfarmers Chemical, Energy and Fertilizers. So effectively we make chemicals for mining, we make fertilizers for farming, and also provide natural gas energy, both LNG and LPG. And there's a few other companies within that umbrella. So we're part of the support services. So we support all those business units and try and get their business running as effectively as possible.
Thanks, Anthea. Jacob?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Jacob Seiler. I did my PhD at Swinburne. I finished September-ish last year. And then since then I moved to Sydney to work as a data scientist in Medius Health. And so at Medius Health, we basically employ AI algorithms and rules processes and models to help people with their health. So over the past year, I've been working a lot with our chatbot called Quro. That's Quro. And that basically is a symptom checker. So you can go on it, you tell it what symptoms you're having, and then it generates things such as intelligent questioning and asks, what other symptoms do you have? And then at the end, it basically gives you a diagnosis and can prompt you on what may be wrong with you and more information. And over the past few months, we're looking into more of the insurance space, because the problem is that, especially in places such as India, it can take many weeks to go from filling in an insurance application to actually getting health insurance or life insurance. And there's a lot of problems in that the systems are very archaic and they're very paper-based, they're very back and forth emails. So we're looking to implement machine learning and rules-based models to basically say, okay, this person's 30 years old. Do they actually need to get a blood test? Do they actually need to go to all these expensive testing? Or can we actually just give them a insurance policy straight away? So that's kind of where I'm at the moment, doing a lot of stuff in the insurance space and AI modeling in the health sector.
Thanks. Richard?
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Scalzo. I'm currently a senior research scientist at Data Analytics for Resources and the Environment, which is a new ARC center. It's actually a PhD program in data science for environmental problems, mining, agriculture, water management, groundwater and surface water, that sort of thing. So we're a multidisciplinary center. We do research as well. So we have postdocs and research engineers. So based out of the University of Sydney. So I'll probably give a somewhat different perspective from everyone else here because I switched rather late. I went through, got my PhD in 2004 and went through 3 postdocs on 2 continents, the last one being at ANU working with Brian Schmidt on the SkyMapper survey, looking for supernovae. So it was a bit late career switch. And I'm still also in academia technically. My job is a research science position, so my job is to publish papers, but now in machine learning and statistics instead of in a single domain area. DARE is also an interesting center from the standpoint that it has strong partnerships with various non-academic entities. It works across academic boundaries, field boundaries, with ecologists and geologists, as well as data scientists, but also with partners such as Geoscience Australia, Newcrest Mining, Water New South Wales, and so on. And the motivation is to train up people to work as data scientists in those organizations to be able to transfer best practices into industry. So I do get a lot of interesting contact, and I've done consulting and other things in this context. We're also different in that we're not, we don't do the big data so much as the small data. We do models of complex systems where the number of dimensions or degrees of freedom is much, much higher than the constraints you have from the data. So we're all basically Bayesians. Knowing your priors becomes important. My particular research and the stuff I'm working on now has to do with making, taking physically motivated models or process-based models in geology or hydrology or physics or what have you, and making them probabilistic. So a lot of MCMC, Markov chain Monte Carlo, and sampling probabilistic spaces of very high dimension or unusual geometries.
Thanks. Suk Yee?
Hi. Hi everyone. My name is Suk Yee Yong. I'm a recent graduate from University of Melbourne. And recent as in like just before the pandemics plugged the world, of course. So it's like February this year. Yeah, I think it has been a hard time. But I guess I have been lucky that my supervisor is willing to hire me for a postdoc right now. But then I recently got a job just started this week actually at Seiler. I'm trying to move from Melbourne to Sydney, but yeah, I think it has been a hard time arranging this stuff. But yeah, back during my PhD, I have done 2 internship at in astronomy and also in biomedical imaging. I think is pretty interesting to explore the difference or similarities that you could involve machine learning and big data and do some data analysis to different sort of fields. And yeah, right now I'm also moving into machine learning right now. So I'm just getting started this week as in, so my project is involving pulsars and fast radio FRBs and also finding the unknowns that's out there using machine learning. So I think it's a really interesting domain to explore as well.
Thanks, Suk Yee. All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for the introductions. To get us started, essentially, what I would like to know from each one of you is, how did you prepare to make the switch? Like, for instance, did you know that you wanted to do data science, and were there any steps that you took before starting to look for jobs? Jacob?
Yeah, so I knew that I would basically be in not academia probably about 2.5 years into the PhD. So this would have been early 2019 when I was looking to graduate late 2019. So that I didn't, probably silly of me, but I didn't do anything specifically to begin this transition because I had hands full with things such as thesis. But it was basically a case of, okay, I'm looking to transition. Let's start getting our feelers out. Let's start actually looking for conferences that I could go to in the data science world. Let's start talking to a few people, a few connections and things like that. So that was kind of my extent of preparing.
Richard, do you want to tell us how you...
Yeah, so as I said, I guess I'd really been following the academic track for some time, and I had hopes of getting a continuing position somewhere. But after a while, I think I just had to concede that, you know, that it was a bit late in the game and that it was going to be hard to compete in some of these cases. And I was getting a short list, and so I knew it was sort of in the zone, but I just said, I don't want to take another postdoc after this. So I went and looked around. I didn't have a strong idea of what I wanted to do either. And I knew that data science was a popular career path, but most of the data science experiences I'd seen out there were in very specific sort of corporate settings with a fairly narrow focus on the kinds of things that were supposed to be done. And there was a, you know, there was like a pathway to it. There are courses online. There were the boot camps like inside, if I felt like doing that. But I think that importantly, I guess I had to, first of all, decided that was, you know, that there were other things that would be interesting to look at, and secondly, you know, I needed to know what was out there. And so so much as Jacob said, it's about exposure for me, and just saying, going to each of my friends that I knew was working in something else, you know, they're your first resource, people you know that will take you seriously, know you well, you know, and just saying, what do you do? Why do you like it? And trying to piece together for me, because I wasn't sure how broad things would be, you know, how broad a set of things I wanted to pursue, I guess, like trying to rank in my head, what did I want out of the job, and what jobs were out there that might be likely to have these attributes in disorder, to make a ranked choice list, so that I knew that I could go for second or third choices if I had to. And yeah, and then after that, it's just about it was for me just about gathering information. So I decided after a while that I didn't want sort of the entry-level data science position. I wanted something that would give me broader exposure, which sounded to me more like a consulting job, so that I could learn as much about what there was out there on the job as I could. And then if I wanted to specialize in a particular area, I could do that. So that's the mindset I went into the search with.
Suk Yee, did you want to tell us? Sounds like you did internships already.
Yeah, so I think for me it's just I'm just trying to explore something new, perhaps. I'm not sure whether it's new, but then I think I just would like to get some exposure on different stuff that I could do beside academics. So because I have spent like excess amount of years finishing up with my undergrads, master, and also the upcoming PhD, I suppose. And during my PhD, I just decided, since I think I just finish up. I finished up writing my PhD I would say pretty quickly, and I have the chance to take some time to explore doing some internships. So I figure out, why not just apply for try to apply for a few internship and try and see how it goes, just to explore what sort of different projects that they offer, and how I guess I'm more interested on how I could apply the skills that I have learned during my graduate studies into different field, I would say. And I think surprisingly, or not, I could basically, the skills that I've learned, of course, you could apply it to different fields as well. For example, it's not just in astronomy, but if you take some time and think about what sort of skills that you actually have, and you will be surprised that the skills that you have could be applied to other fields as well.
That's funny. Like reminds me of the second session we had. Jill Rathman mentioned something like that. She had gone to an industry networking session, and I had just made the translation of the academic skills we have into the industry terms, and then it's like, oh, hey, look, we have all of the skills, just name it differently. So, Anthea, it sounded like you got your job reasonably quickly.
I did, but then there was still a bit of a deciding what I wanted to do. So I was, during my postdoc, I really sort of decided that the academic life, that uncertainty, moving around, and being a professor didn't really appeal to me, because I really still wanted to get my hands dirty in things for the time to come. So I started talking, as Richard did, to friends who had left the field, and the ones that had gone into data science, and what they were doing was really what excited me. And I decided that that was a good choice, because I still got to do science. I just got to do it in more practical things, because that was the other thing about astronomy. Like, it's very, very cool, but it's not necessarily practical. And like, I would like to think that my work was making an impact. So data science was an easy fit for me. And then from then on, I started looking into a lot of online courses, so understanding machine learning, what the different approaches were, just so I could get my head around of what was possible out there. And then I also had the two-body problem. So my partner got a 5-year contract at Curtin University, so I was currently living in Melbourne. We both were, but he was moving across to WA. So knowing that, and knowing that I didn't know anyone in WA, one of the when he just moved over, and one of the first weeks there was sort of a data science, software engineering sort of conference that I saw, just like a public day. So I made sure I went across to that and met people and sort of networked, I guess is the word, and try and do that. So there was a few sort of opportunities that came up from that. I also, again, we're sort of taught in academia that maybe we don't have the skills. And I think that's what I really want to highlight in this session is we do have all of those. So I did actually sign up for an internship, a short 10-week internship in Melbourne as well, while I was applying for jobs. And there's a contact with Curtin University with West Farmers at the time. So Kath Trott, which I'm sure you all know, which is Jack's boss, my partner's boss at the time, was like, I know you're looking for jobs, so here's this job that they're advertising. So that's how I got in contact with that position.
That actually brings me to a question that we thought about, which is frequently you might have decided on the place you want to live in and then look for jobs around there. Is that like in academic, if you're only interested in academic jobs, that's basically won't happen. It's very unlikely to happen. I assume it's easier if you're willing to explore a broader range of careers. Is that the case?
Yeah, definitely. I found that there's actually lots of opportunities that I could have taken once deciding in Perth. I think even more in the bigger cities like Sydney and Melbourne, there's a lot of technical positions out there.
Did anyone else have share their experience and like searching for jobs, the availability of jobs?
Yeah, I think, well, for me, at first, I'm basically just restricting myself to Victoria, or is it just Melbourne in particular? And I find that, of course, I think the thing is that it's not impossible to get a job in a specific area, but definitely you have more choices if you broaden out your coverage, I would say. But yeah, as I say, it's not impossible, but it's just fewer jobs that's offered depending on your specific specific area that you are you think that you would like to stay.
So how does so my understanding is you look for jobs on LinkedIn or Seek. Is there any secret to or things that people should know? Or is that LinkedIn and Seek are the go-to, or are there any other? How does one go about searching for data science jobs, for instance?
I think for me, the university website helps a lot. And I think the recent upgrade that they have done in organizing the website in the university career website is quite useful. They have added a lot of functionality as well, which provides some insight on what sort of skills the employer are seeking as well. And not only that, I think the job that they have listed in the university website is also linked to Seek and other like third-party career website like Indeed, Seek. I'm not sure Jora is included as well. Yeah, so they have a lot. They not only compile, for example, academic jobs, but also industry as well. So I think it's quite helpful to find jobs in using the website.
Is this at University of Melbourne website that you're?
Yeah, it's a university career website. But I think you do need to have a Unimail credential, but I'm not sure you could log in as a guest.
Right.
I was going to say, yes. So Seek and LinkedIn, I definitely looked at those and applied for jobs along that. But then again, as I said, mine was sort of a personal career. So it was a job that was on Seek, but it was sort of forward to me through people. The other thing, that networking event, which was developers, or DDD, sort of, I did build up some connections there. I didn't sort of pursue them much further because I got my job offer, but there was definitely opportunities. There was people from cash converters that were wanting to do a Kaggle competition together to sort of understand how well we work together, and other opportunities in Bank West and potential that could have come from that. So I think that's another way of doing it. So reaching out to community, go to meetups and things like that, and talk to people. People are willing to do favors for people they know.
Yeah, I think I really want to echo the statement of going to meetups and conferences and things like that, because I was very fortuitous in that I went to Sydney for PyCon, which is a Python convention, and there was quite literally a board that was looking for work. And I mean, I was 2 or so months away from completing the PhD, and I put my name up on that, and then someone gave me a call and said, yeah, all right, let's meet up and chat. And then we had a chat later that week in their office, and then after that chat, they offered me a job. So very much go to these networking events, these conferences, and just talk to people and make it known that you're interested in the space and that you're looking for work.
Excellent. Richard, I wanted to hear, since you have the longest experience in this, I want to hear what your take has been so far.
About what, sorry?
How does one go about looking for data science jobs? Right?
Oh, right, yeah. That's, I have to say, I got lucky in that, mine basically fell in my lap. But in that I applied for 2 jobs and then got one of them before the things went on too long. So one of them, the one I ended up getting was at what was then the Center for Translational Data Science at Sydney Uni. That had a broader scope than the environment and dealt with things like in health and so on. And I found that one through a newsletter. I think it was a research career newsletter that I still to this day don't know how I got signed up for it. But I was looking one day and I said, oh, wow, that actually looks interesting. So I called the chair of the committee and said, hey, is this he's like, what, your degree's in physics? Oh, just apply. So that worked out. But the other one was, I heard it through word of mouth, actually, because, another astronomer who I knew said, oh yeah, we're hiring. And in fact, they had a referral program, that said, if you have someone on the, if you have someone on the inside, that can be really powerful, right? And they say, yes, I know this person, and I can say this much about them. So I believe, when I applied, it's like, how did you hear about it? Did you hear about it from a current employee? And I said, oh yes, and I could name them. And besides that, of course, anyone who actually works at the company will be able to tell you sort of what the technical team is looking for, and there's a lot of stuff that gets lost in HR often, and so having some kind of inside perspective can be really helpful on that. So yeah, I would definitely, my first choices always would be to find out through my network in some way, because they'll know me and I'll know them, and then you have that more personal connection to it, as opposed to just being one of 500 people that find this ad on Seek. You can still go for those, and you should use all available channels, but I would look first to my network.
So effectively, if you go through an inside channel, the hit rate is better.
It's likely to be better because it's more tailored, I would say. You can make more targeted approaches, I think, through your network and through people who know your capabilities and who are doing things you think are interesting, than you can in just going through job aggregators or online sites.
Okay. Right. I see a question on the chat here. Is there this is from Nicole? The question is there anything that makes an astronomy PhD special over other PhDs for data science?
I can start answering that. So there is, I think, one is we've got coding skills. We're used to big data as well and manipulating that. That's one. The other is communication. Most of us are used to actually outreach communication, which is even an extra step. So we know how to not only communicate with our peers, we know how to communicate with people that don't know the subject matter. That's a huge skill, because everyone, you're not going to be talking technical to anyone in the business, effectively, except for your co-workers. And then the other thing is, what I found at least, is you've got physics. And I might be a bit biased here, but effectively means we can look at the big picture. We know how the physical world works, and you can sanity check things. Because a lot of people that have just come through like data science master's degrees and all that kind of stuff come from stats, and they purely look at the numbers. But we have the perspective to say, oh, we're seeing a relationship between pressure and temperature. Oh, that makes sense. Or we're seeing something else that, oh, maybe we can use heat transfer in this. Things like that, that I think make us really strong candidates in this area.
Did anyone else on the panel want to say why you asked?
I think one of the key things is kind of being able to problem solve. I mean, I've worked with people who come through the Masters of Data Scientists. Also, I've worked with, currently there's 2 other PhD holders, recipients, but they're both in the machine learning area. And something that I've realized is that everyone is really good when all the data looks nice, when all the data is cleaned, it's all nicely formatted and everything like that. But as soon as you go, okay, here's the problem, we don't have any data, the wheels start to fall off. And I feel that's kind of, as astronomers, that's our real strength, in that we know, okay, we've only got this sample of 10 galaxies. How exactly are we going to pull out trends and analyze that stuff? Or, okay, here's this simulation that's in this garbage format. How are we going to actually translate this format into something that's useful? And apply something that's not so much, all right, we can't apply a statistical model here because we don't have enough data or the data isn't cleaned. All right, how are we going to make some assumptions and go from A to C, which may not be appropriate, but it's what you have to do. So I think that's the real power of an astronomy PhD, is just this problem solving when everything's not nice and neat.
Yes, I
I'd just like to
second
jump
that.
in. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I second that, with the one exception that you might call assumptions priors, in which case it actually is a statistical model, and there are whole schools of statistics that deal with that. But yeah, everything that the others have said, I would say, and that's we think quantitatively. We're an observational science, so we're also used to dealing with messy things that we can't control necessarily. We do have that communication edge that Anthea mentioned that I think is really valuable. Yeah, we're used to coding. We're used to cleaning things up and sort of gluing them together in practical sorts of ways. So I think all of those are good points that I don't think are always covered in the other sciences, even physics more broadly. I think particle physics more. Maybe because they also have big experiments where they have to take lots of data, but their conditions are controlled, and they maybe focus a little bit more on simulation. So it's, but like lab physics or like biology or ecology and so on, the kinds of things they bring to it are different and not always so well aligned with the skills you need for a data science career, I think, as the astronomers are. I think the astronomers are just way out in front just due to all of those factors.
Anthea, you were saying something.
I was just saying that I completely agree. I agree with what Jacob is saying. Like, if we forget, because we're all doing it in research, that we're on the forefront. So we're figuring out the stuff that hasn't been figured out yet. So we're all really well versed in problem solving. And as Richard said, we have experiments that we can't control, samples that we can't control, because maybe the observations only got one night of observation rather than the 4 nights that we had scheduled, and we have to try and make do with what we've got.
Yeah, it's always like my understanding is data science is 80 to 90% cleaning and getting the data into the right sort of usable ways before you can do anything. There's a couple of questions that's sort of on the same side. Because this is the pandemic and because jobs have become vulnerable, potential, or disappeared and things like that, visa issues have become, visas have become more restrictive. Do you guys know anything about visas and how often do visas become an impediment to getting jobs in data science? Like permanent resident. If you're not a permanent resident, if you're an immigrant, an international person, then is that a big barrier?
Maybe. I think it's just well, of course, you know, I'm an international student or applicant here, so I think visa has always been one of those things that I need to do along the way. For example, after when I get here for my master, and from my master to PhD, then I do need to apply for another visa as well. And after my PhD, I do need to apply for another visa as well. So yeah, it has always been one of those obstacles to, I would say to, I think I often need extra steps to proceed in whatever I want to do. Yeah, for example, finding a job. So I think is of course, one of the obstacles is that being an international applicant means that you can't apply for certain jobs because you do, for example, if you want to apply for a security job, I don't think we could do that unless you are a permanent resident here or unless you are a citizen here. But I think if you are interested in applying for other jobs, there's still quite a fair amount of industry or academic-wise position that allows you to apply for the job. So I think is your option would be kind of lesser compared to others, but it's definitely not zero, I would say. So I think for me, I just have, I mean, especially during these times where jobs are scarce. So I think I kind of take some time to, I mean, there are only a few jobs that are that I'm interested in. Probably it's because due to the current situation, but I would say there are less jobs that's offered. So it does take some a few months or more to sort things out and just to find whether the job you are interested in or whether you are just applying it because you are desperate to get one job. Yeah. But I think the most important part is, of course, do find a job that interests you, because I think the project and getting the work done is just more. I guess it's just more fulfilling, I think.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, one of those, like I've looked at jobs that are only for permanent residents. Particularly, I remember when there was jobs on BOM, the Bureau of Meteorology. It's like, oh, this looks fast. But the good news is that if you're an astronomy, if you're an Australian PhD, it does put you in a better spot so that if you're going to apply for permanent residency. But you'll have to find out. This is a real barrier. There was another question. Yes. One question that Tintin asked was that, is there a difference between data science and research and development type jobs?
I would think so. Again, I don't know much about the research and development jobs, but I feel like those tend to be prototyping sort of roles compared to data science, which is effectively data analytics, machine learning. So I think that depends on your organization. And I think that's a very big thing to state. Depending on your organization, depends on what role you'll actually be playing. There's also a role called data engineering, which is effectively the ingestion of data, the cleaning, the management of that as well. And depending if your company is small, your data science and that will be combined. But yes, my impression of research and development is more specific projects, all encompassing maybe building something rather than just dealing with the data.
Yeah, and I agree that it's very much a function of your company size, in that as you go to a company that's larger, you may have more defined roles, as in, okay, you've been hired as a data scientist, you'll go work in the data science team. You're not going to be plugging away at back-end code or the engineering side of things. But if you're in more of a smaller team, yeah, okay, you might be hired as a data scientist, but we don't have enough people. So you're going to have to put on your data engineering hat and go make some databases and talk about solution design and things like that. And that's a scenario that I've found myself in. It's a case of, okay, I've been hired as a data scientist, but I'm more part of the research and development team, in that I don't get to sit down and just play with pandas and NumPy all day. I need to actually go to meetings, talk about, all right, how are we going to actually start this idea, which is do X, and how are we going to take that from actually getting the data, analyzing the data, and then building some sort of back-end interface, and then actually taking that and talking to the front-end team and things such as that. Kind of a R&D is a bit more holistic than just the data science world, which is one aspect of it.
So I'm going to move to essentially how the job search itself went. Like, how does it? So we know academic jobs, you apply, you get a short list, you go for an interview. Either you get an offer or you never hear back. Effectively, that's, for those that haven't applied, this is roughly how it goes. How does it work for industry jobs? Is it a similar process?
Keep on jumping in the first, but honestly, I was very similar to Richard to start off with, that I actually only formally applied for 2 positions. One I never heard back from. The other was the one that I got, and the process was effectively apply, and then I actually had several interview rounds. So the first was sort of a general, sort of get to know you, a little bit technical, but sort of understand that you are capable. So it was probably the most formal of the interviews, the first one. Then there was a second one. So I did both, remotely. I was still living in Melbourne at the time. And so I did, then the second one was actually meeting my team. So it was a bit more about communication, how I'd fit with the team fit, things like that. And a few more technical questions. And then the last was actually an in-person. So Wesfarmers has an advanced analytics center in Melbourne. So I met the lead data scientist there, and met me in person to make sure that I was not reading from a script. There wasn't someone speaking in my ear, I guess, and then had a lot of technical conversation with them to check that I was capable. And then after that, I got a phone call and then effectively a contract sent through about whether I would like to accept the position.
I'm just curious, how long was the time frame over which this happened?
pretty quick. I would say the 3 interviews probably took place. Oh yeah, actually I forgot. So after the first interview, I was given homework. So actually there was 4 interviews. I lie. I just obviously blocked that out. So after the first interview, then there was homework, where effectively I had to try and solve a problem. I sent my working back. So it was just a Kaggle composition, sent my working back. I actually didn't finish it, if that makes people feel better. I didn't actually get a complete solution, but effectively walked through what I did find, and had to present that. So that was also a presenting. The reason I had the 3rd interview out of the 4th was effectively, they were originally advertising for 1 position, and then they decided that they want 2 people. So the team that I was going to belong to changed slightly. So I had an interview with the team. So.
Did anyone else want to share their experience with job interviews? Industry job interviews.
So as I mentioned, my first job kind of fell into my lap, and so that involved a phone call, and then, all right, you sound okay, you sound interesting, come into the office and we'll have a chat. And then after that, it was literally as I was kind of walking out of the door of the building, they gave me a phone call and said, yeah, okay, we want to hire you, and they sent through the contract. However, during April this year and the plague, I was stood down. And so during that time, I also did apply for some jobs through Glassdoor. And out of those 15 or so applications, I think probably 13, you never hear back from them. And then one of them was this kind of coding interview where they send you a link to a site and you have an hour to complete this kind of problem. And then however you do on the problem kind of depends whether or not they talk to you again. And I think this is kind of a standard thing in the industry, in that you're either given either homework in that, okay, complete this thing and then send it back, or during one of the interviews themselves, they'll ask you to kind of get up on the whiteboard and explain a problem.
A couple of questions in the chat window. This one is from Sarah. So essentially what Sarah is saying, how did you go about translating problem solving skills and really technical astro experience? Like, I reduced HST data is probably not going to fly in an industry resume, right? So how do you translate that technical astro experience into an industry resume? Richard, with that.
I mean, I'm trying not to hijack it since I technically still have an academic position. Right. And so a lot of these, I'm not going to know the answers to a lot of these questions that our other capable panelists, probably will know better than me. But as far as changing fields, at least, I did try to keep in mind, I guess, the framing and who I was talking to, and the way I framed it going into the application and writing the selection criteria, for example. So I sent through my whole CV because I said this is a university job, but then in addressing the selection criteria, I was consistently saying, I've done data science with astronomical data. I talked more about the constraints on the problem, like this is the volume of data, this is the sense of the challenge, without getting into the depths of supernovae are, type 1a supernovae or white dwarfs and so on. But just saying, I had to do demanding image processing tasks. So I had to write a pipeline to go through all those images. I had I became familiar with machine learning, either boosted nets or random forest, to go through all the examples and find the supernovae. In terms of actually doing supernova science, I talked about hierarchical bays and ways of finding quick answers to otherwise very complicated questions about supernovae. So it was mostly about focusing on just the technical skills, and I guess keeping in mind, again, remembering that we are qualified. We're doing data science. We're just doing it with different data sets. And in particular, if there's anything about the job, and that was sort of for general data science, right? And just saying, yes, I'm capable in this area. But if you're going into, some other narrower targeted jobs and figuring out a little bit more about the kinds of things that they're going to want you to do. What kinds of models will they want you to build? What does their data look like? And then, mapping over as much as you can your experiences to those characteristics. And that's, again, I think a place where it probably helps to have someone on the inside or someone who's familiar with those kinds of data.
Suk Yee, I was going to ask you, you mentioned you did an internship in a biomedical field, right? How did you have to tweak your CV to apply for those jobs?
Slightly, I would say, but I think I was lucky that the job essentially asked for an astrophysicist with an interest in biomedical field. Yeah, so yeah, I think essentially they asked they are about to hire two PhD students, I would say. So one is a bioengineer. Yeah, the applicant would need to specialize in I would say biomedical field. But yeah, the other position is an astrophysicist with an interest in biomedical field. So I say, oh yeah, sure, why not apply for it? And yeah, I mean, well, the thing is that I think what appeals me is essentially I get a chance to see how applicable my astrophysics skills are to other fields, which is pretty interesting. But I think the thing is that I kind of I would say I would need to tweak a little my CV in a sense that I just need to exclude all the technical details in astronomy, for example, and just ensure that what you are doing in astronomy field is basically could be applied in biomedical field as well. So it's just like, oh, I have done data analysis. I have analyzed the data set in for example, what I'm doing is quasars, and so I would just try to relate what I'm doing. For example, I did data analysis and machine learning on a large data set of quasars, but of course they don't really necessarily need to know what is quasar exactly, but then the main point is that they could see how you relate the skills that you have to what the job is about, what the project they are asking for. So I think yeah, in the sense I think they did mention that's what basically appeals in my CV as well, because you could relate, you could somewhat during the interview you could somewhat relate what you are doing to other field as well. I think they do realize that of course you are not a biomedical expert, so during the interview they would just ask oh, how would you do it, how would you do something if you are given a task, for example. They won't ask you like what is the different aspect in biomedical field. So yeah, it's essentially trying to relate what you're doing.
So would it be, if I'm understanding, it's essentially tailor what your experience is, but recast it in terms of the actual job description.
Yeah.
And that will.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I do know that I'm somewhat, I would say, lacking in biomedical aspect, but then I think they do realize that, yeah, that's why the job is, that's why the job said that astrophysicists with interest in biomedical field instead of with biomedical skills. Yeah, so I think they do understand that, of course, you're working as an astrophysicist, they don't expect you to also have a biomedical. I mean, I do take a biology during undergrad, but yeah, it's not too specialized in what they are doing. So yeah, but the essence is that you could learn from it. I mean, you could. I mean, because of what I have done my project is essentially also involve data manipulation and data analysis. So you could somewhat relate the big data set that you have, for example, to the data set that they have and do some analysis on it.
Yeah, I agree. It's effectively what Richard and Suk Yee have said. It's framing what you've done. So it's also talk about the translating to something they can do. Like I've translated this volume of data and did analysis on it, but I think you can also frame the problem solving stuff. Like we were faced with this problem, so I had to build this platform to deal with it, this strategy, all that kind of stuff. Also show that your problem solving skills and resilience in there, like your flexibility to change and adapt to things is important to translate, because those are the skills they're actually looking for. And just saying the technical skills, yes, I've used Bayesian probability to solve this problem. I simulated data, I analyzed data, all that kind of stuff. You don't need to go into the specifics, but frame it with the job description in mind.
I see another question, which is it common to have remote data science jobs? I mean, these days, obviously, most people are remote. Richard, did you want to?
This might be a good time to mention that I have a remote data science job effectively, where I've been employed at the University of Sydney for a while, but for the last few years, for the last couple of years, my partner and I have lived in Melbourne, and we bought a house in Melbourne. So I've been commuting back and forth a fair amount, but I worked something out, with my supervisor. I said, look, this is the deal. And she was like, oh my God, let's work something out. So, because she was, because I fit in well, and I was, and she wanted to retain me, which was good. But we have a good sort of fairly flexible workplace anyway, in terms of, bringing your kids in and working from home or what have you. But I think my case is a little unusual, and particularly in the pandemic, when instead of going back to Sydney, I went back to Melbourne, and now I'm still in Melbourne because Melbourne's still locked down, even though the people in Sydney have already started going back to the office. Although we'll see how long that lasts. But these are kind of weird times, and I think that there may be more openness to doing a greater fraction of your work remotely than there was before the pandemic, surely. And if you can argue that that's better for your situation, and you say I'll be more effective if I work X% of my time from home, then that's a good thing to be able to go into an argument, or not an argument, but a negotiation with, if you're in a position you would like to negotiate for that. I've been working completely 100% remotely since March, and able to do things in the middle of a pandemic. So I think it depends a large part on the workplace and what they're willing, what the culture is like and how well they accommodate it. And that'll be arranged. And that's one question that I would certainly ask before going into any further job, what their policies are like.
Yeah, it's always good to ask what their policies, and it varies company to company. That's great.
I know someone in my organization when I started almost 2 years ago. They were working, so it was the same position, but then they split into the two. And he worked remotely in Sydney. Luckily, Wesfarmers has got lots of businesses. They have a business office based in Sydney, so he used to go and just sit there. But as Richard said, now I think it's way more open and accepting of remote working, but it also depends on the company. I'm also a huge believer that you've got to be there in person sometimes. To really understand the context of the problem. But I think that, yeah, it's definitely possible to do remote work. I've seen it work.
Another question that's there from James. What sort of jobs suit astronomy grads better compared to a typical data science position? I feel like this is good. Did anyone want to?
I guess I'll say it's not clear that there is a typical data science position, and I think it's going to depend a lot on the company and what they need, and the size of the company which may mean you need multiple different hats, or if it's a big firm, then you're going to slot into a very specific role in a very specific team that already exists. It's going to depend on the sector, the volumes of their data. So I guess, again, I'm a little different in that most of the clientele I've seen for the big data jobs, at least the big corporate clients, are going to be like, retail or insurance or something like that. Whereas for the small data jobs, the ones that need more complex model or Bayesian expertise are going to be more like mining or water or management consulting, or these areas where if you make a decision, or in insurance as far as risk is concerned as well, of say very rare events, how do you assess the probability of this happening? So those are cases where they're focusing on more on high cost decision making, where you have one decision that'll have consequences that are hard to reverse and cost a lot of money. So there's definitely, there are different poles within that, but I think that we'd probably be good at all of them, in that it depends just on sort of what your focus is. Pretty much every astronomy grad these days has to learn coding. Probably should learn Bayesian stats, because a lot of astronomy is Bayesian. If you're trying to infer things about objects that you can't bring into the lab, you can't do the frequentist kind of approach of repeating an experiment on this. I can't do that to a star. So it's not always true, but I mean, but it's a very strong component. So I think that there's a scope within astronomy, I guess, to have a lot of different experiences that are relevant to data, and there are a lot of conversely a lot of data science positions out there, I imagine, that will be better or worse suited for your particular skill set. So that's, again, knowing sort of what you're good at and going through and just doing the homework about what's out there.
This is all my study has been done as well. That what your interests lie, and this is what Suk Yee was saying earlier as well. There's plenty of jobs available. Another question that I see is from Anisha, which is what Anisha is saying is that most data science jobs seem to ask, or internships ask for computer scientists or data science graduates, mathematics graduates. How do astronomy students approach these internships or jobs?
I think you approach them normally, as in you apply kind of as if you did have that job, because when someone says we want computer science graduates, they don't exactly mean they want computer science graduates. They want someone who has the skills of a computer science graduate, and astronomers have the skills of a computer science graduate. And as has been told before, if you approach these jobs and you are honest and forthright in saying, I'm not a computer science graduate, I'm an astronomer, they will understand that. And as a result, they'll tailor their questions and their interview kind of things towards you as an astronomer. So for example, in my case, I had 2 PhD machine learning people interviewing me. And so that they weren't going to ask me questions about, okay, how should you use this kind of model? When should you use random forests or things like that? It was more, okay, explain what you did during your PhD. What is your skills? And it became very obvious that there was a lot of overlap in that, okay, what they wanted is someone who knew how to handle graphs and kind of walking from graph to nodes in a graph. And it was a case of, okay, during my PhD, I did a lot of this in terms of halo merging, in that I'm walking from different halo merges to various things like that. So I think you approach it as if you do have a data science, you are a computer science or data science graduate, but just make it clear that you are an astronomer. And if they're a company that's worth their salt, they'll realize that and recognize it and kind of tailor the tasks and the questions and the job to you.
Sometimes they don't know what they want, like that astronomers could be that role. So you've got to, pretty much sell, hey, in astronomy, I did all of this. I ticked all of these boxes, because no one outside of astronomy may not know that you're a really good coder, that you have done machine learning, things like that.
So go for it. This is the
Yeah, I
advice
agree, because because I think most of yeah, when you apply for the job, most of the time I have seen they have not specified physicists exactly, or I think they always emphasize computer scientists or data scientists. But the thing is that I think we astronomer or astrophysicists do data manipulation as well. And I think they often mistaken astrophysicists as just looking at the sky and that's about it. So I think it's really important to, yeah, when you apply for it, just mention that, oh, you know, we have done, we also have looked at this data set and do some analysis to it. It's not just about taking the data set and looking at the sky. So I think it's really important to emphasize on what you have done in your cover letter and in your CV as well.
Cool, thanks. I have an anonymous question that's for Richard. Question is, what was the most challenging aspect for making the switch, making a relatively late transition? And is there any advantage as a data scientist within an university versus an industry?
Yeah, no, that's why I framed things when I was searching as I did, right? Because I know that there are these, that if I was going for, you know, an entry level data science position at a data science team in a relatively conventional setting, that, you know, I would probably be competing with recent PhD graduates who are younger and fresher and could code better than me, and also, you know, but also maybe didn't have the same depth of experience that I had in approaching problems and so on. So I figured that I needed to do, approach the problem with my own particular context in mind, and saying, like, you know, I want to be able to get the benefit. I want that experience and breadth and adaptability to be a benefit, and to counter myself. So that's why I guess I was looking for more. I guess I was looking for something where I could learn a lot of things quickly, and that brought me down the consulting line, with the hopes I imagined at the time to be able to leapfrog into a more senior role later, saying, look, I was in this data science center from the ground up, you know, or I've worked on a large variety of things, and so I know my chops. If you want me to build you a group, I could do that. So that was the mentality, I guess, that I went in with. I said, yes, I could try to go for those roles, and I think, but I'd rather try to use the things that would otherwise count against me as assets. And yeah, that was so I had to frame it specifically that way, and try not to think about. Now, I guess I wasn't also specifically sure that I wanted to go the data science route in particular, so I was looking for any kind of capacity in which that would be helpful, and I happened to settle in this one.
The second was there any advantage as being do you know of any advantage being a data scientist within university versus outside?
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. No. Well, not anymore. Not with the budget cuts that I'm sure we're going to see coming down. But I mean, it's been interesting in that I think I've really enjoyed my job in any case, and that it has given me an opportunity to interact with a really, really broad cross section of people. You know, people across different academic areas that have really interesting work to do, and also, you know, people in industry who we're working with, and to frame it, problems that make interesting data science research, and also have impact in the broader world. So that's one nice thing, which I think that I might not have gotten if I was, you know, again, working on within a team at a big firm, say, that I have that cross section, that richness and breadth of experience. That's part of what I went in. I went in looking for jobs like that, and I think that's one thing that's really nice at a university. There's also, apart from the Dare Center and what was CTDS, there was also a core facility called the Sydney Informatics Hub, which is mostly engineering, that some of you may be familiar with. I guess there's also roles like, you know, ADAX and so on, a few that give opportunities to, that I imagine give similar opportunities, right? That you can work across the breadth of problems that are posed to you. So I think that's one thing that I think I like about this particular environment that may be similar, say, to a consulting firm kind of environment.
All right, so now for the final questions in the session, which is, how do you like your job? And I'll start off with a question from Sarah, that normally we think about academic jobs as being flexible, you work your own hours. Is the data science jobs restrictive? Do you have to maintain fixed hours?
I think it's a case of, it's not as flexible as academia, but I wouldn't say that it's restrictive, in that during my PhD, if I didn't want to go into the office that day, I didn't go into the office that day. And I don't think literally anybody would have noticed unless, or said anything other than the office mate would have just went, oh, Jacob's not in today. All right. However, in the kind of data science world, you're in a more established team. You have things such as delivery dates and meetings that need to be done. So while you can't say, oh, I'm not going to go into work today, you kind of has more responsibilities. However, that's not to say that it's restrictive. In a lot of the jobs, there is this kind of, okay, you've got a medical appointment at 10 o'clock. Okay, come in at 11 after you're done. And I think that will be very standard across kind of this industry, in that the fact that we are highly skilled and highly technical affords us this level of like responsibilities or privileges, in that because we are trusted that we are so skilled, there really won't be anyone who's consciously always noting down our time that we spend and always chasing us up and things like that. There's a level of independence that is assumed in this kind of data science world. So it's not restrictive at all.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think there's probably more meetings than I would have in the academic world. But the other thing is that depending on your company, they're also quite flexible and you can shift your hours a little bit. But I think there's actually a positive thing to that, is if you're working really late all the time, your team will check on you and say, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, go home. Like, nothing's that important. So I think that's the other balance, right? And depending on the organization, maybe if you're in more an R&D sort of role, the one thing I do miss sometimes is that flexibility to spend a day just looking at something random. But my team's also been really good that I book in learn time, where I just sort of go and I have a look at something random. But then it's also, if there is a deadline coming up, then I skip learn time. We have daily check-ins to sort of see what everyone's working on at the time, but that also just enables communication between the team. So I think it's a real balance. It's not restrictive, but it is different balance.
Yeah, for me, I think it depends as well. Because yeah, during my internship, I think I like to work late instead of an early person, I would say. But yeah, if it's necessary, of course, I would work early. But the main point is that as long as you have shown you do your work and shown some results, so I think they are pretty flexible in the way you work, because I think they do understand that some of us just are more productive during the night. So I think the thing is that as long as you have done your work effectively, they wouldn't mind you coming late. But I think it really depends, as long as you do the task that's required, and also, for example, attend meetings that's during the morning. But else, I think is quite flexible in a sense.
And the second question, part of the related question is, do you guys like your job? Okay,
Yes.
that's a yes from everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's this kind of, I don't know, stigma almost about kind of industry, in that if you go to industry, you kind of enter this soul crushing world where you're no longer allowed to be creative, or nothing will interest you, or things such as that. And I think it's very easy to kind of get hung up on this idea of, I'm an astronomer. The only thing I care about is the epoch of reionization, and everything else is not interesting at all. But once you actually kind of step out of your comfort zone, you realize, hang on a second, there's while yes, I do enjoy this specific topic, what I actually enjoy more is solving problems and finding solutions. And okay, maybe I'm not doing simulations of quasars, but this thing may be equally as interesting. It may be looking at traffic in a shopping center and looking at how that can be changed, and investigating things like that, or looking at shipping logistics, or in my case, looking to predict health based on lifestyle factors and things such as that. So I think your kind of creativity and your interest and your problem solving doesn't go away. It merely changes, and it manifests into something different. And the good part is that something different can change over a month's or a few weeks time span. Whereas in academia, it's very much, okay, I've signed a 3.5-year postdoc to look at this set of 10 galaxies, and nothing else will ever come into my system. Whereas it's in industry, it's often, all right, this month we're looking at this system, but oh, okay, a business has come to us with this problem. Let's look into that problem.
Awesome. There's another question on here. Is there anything you wish you had known about your current jobs while you were still in Astro? Or perhaps a related question would be, if you could go back and tell yourself, what would you tell yourself while you were still in Astro?
It's probably just that the skills that we have are highly valued, and we actually are. We can translate. We are. I'm trying to say, like, as we know as PhDs, that there's not many of us out there, and there's not many of us out there that actually have that skills, and they are appreciated. You don't just have to become a professor. That's not the only path available to you.
Anyone else want to add?
I think it's kind of wish I'd known. It's very much, the world is a big place. That's very much what I wish I'd known, and astronomy is a very small part of it. And I really would encourage myself, my past self, to go out and explore that world. Look at all of these companies and see all of the amazing things that they're doing, because astronomy, it can be kind of blinding in that we're very focused on the problems of astronomy, but there's a whole world out there, not just the universe, but the whole world of the Earth has problems for us to help solve.
Yeah, I agree as well, because that's why I have taken a few internships, just to get some ideas on what sort of different things that they are doing out there. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I guess it's I think it's not even just astronomy as a as an over-consuming interest in saying, like, I only care about the epoch of reionization, but it's something of an identity claim as well. That, like, I am a scholar in the ivory tower, that I think about very important things in the bigness of the universe, and I can't imagine that anything else outside that would be worth doing. I think I came to I think I held that kind of mentality even since grad school for a very long time. That sort of mentality was baked in with me, and so a large part of the transition was for me sort of deconstructing that and working out of it. No, actually, it's a job. It is like any other. It's not me like any other job, but it is a job. And so it's worth asking. getting behind that and saying, what do you actually like about this? You know, what are the parts that are worth keeping, you know, that you won't fall apart as a person if you do something else. And then, you know, knowing that there were not just other things out there, but other things that were suited to me, and that I could ask, and that I could go and act, you know, that I'm not powerless to go out and actively seek the things that I was looking for. So yeah, I mean, I would, you know, in that capacity, I think I would go back and try to maybe loosen that grip. I don't know if everybody else has that experience, but I certainly know that I did, and you know, I have a feeling it's not uncommon at some level. So I would tell my past self that, you know, everything's going to be fine, but really, you know, think more broadly than that, because the world is broader than that.
Yeah. All right, I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to take these two last questions. One's from Robert. Do you still play with astro data as a hobby, or keep up on astro stuff? I see no, and then no, and then
I'm still working in Astro right now.
That's
so
true.
I have no comment.
I still do from time to time.
I'm not shaking out
I was going to say yes. From time to time, I still do. I'm involved at least in sort of a supervisory level on some like astro projects, like with for honor students or PhD students who have a data intensive aspect of what they're doing. Because if my basic, and I think I do more of that now than I think I used to do more of that than I do now, because now I'm just so overwhelmed with environmental problems that are also all very interesting and socially meaningful for me anyway. But I still do have I still do keep a couple of fingers in data related projects. And I guess I have a bit of that freedom because I'm still a university. And so I still, and to the extent that, you know, my job is about writing interesting machine learning methods publications, you know, in whatever venue, and they can be, you know, in applied venues or domain venues, as well as in stats journals, then, you know, I have more of a remit to do that kind of thing, I think, than I would if I worked in some other setting. So I guess that's another benefit for the person who's asking about benefits of university jobs, is that you have maybe a little bit more freedom to do that sort of thing. And
the final question from the chat is that, how important is it to have something like this from Kirsten? How important is it to have something like a GitHub or a portfolio for data science jobs? I'm going to.
It wasn't for me. I had one of the goals that I did with my the end of my postdoc was to have published a code, an astronomy based one, and try and put some documentation, but I don't think that was what got me over the line. And again, it depends on the organization. But it's a nice to have, but I don't think it's a must have, because I think we can convince our employers of what we've done without that.
Yeah, I agree as well, because I think if you could show your, I mean, I do know when some of them do specify, yes, you do need to have a GitHub, but for me, I do have a GitHub, but I don't often use it. Yeah. But I think the main point is to show that you have the skills instead of overemphasizing your GitHub. I think if you do have a GitHub and you do always and you do often use it, then sure, go ahead and put up your GitHub, and it's quite a good thing to have, just to show what sort of a project that you have. And in general, but yeah, some of them is not required, I think.
That's to me, it's not so much a GitHub specifically or something like that. It's more the skills that are associated with it, rather than, okay, while you don't need a GitHub, it is useful for showing, okay, I do know how to code, or I do know how to use version control and things like that. So it's a case of, while you don't necessarily need a GitHub per se, I think the skills associated with GitHub, with writing code, publishing code, and things like that, I think are tools that you need. So while you don't need it to be public, I think having those skills is a necessary thing.
All right, thanks. All right, so we're coming close, so I'll give an opportunity for every one of the panel members if you want to share any last closing thoughts and comments for people that might be considering transitioning into a data science career. Anthea, do you want to go first?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, my main takeaway is data science is really, really cool. There is lots of really interesting projects that are coming up in a lot of organizations, and it's something that a lot of organizations really want to embrace. Yes, sometimes you have to get over old mindsets, but it is something that there's a lot of potential, and it's really interesting, challenging work. So you won't miss out on anything. And yeah, again, you've got the skills to do it.
Jacob?
I think my main takeaway is that there is no such thing as what is data science. Data science varies from person to person, from city to city, from company to company. I think it's a really case of what you should do is just broaden your horizons, go search for yourself, go on your own kind of pilgrimage to these different websites and look at the jobs and talk to people and things such as that. Because as we've been saying, we have the skills. It's up to us to decide where exactly we want to apply it. We're all highly, highly skilled people. It's basically our choice to decide where to go.
Richard?
Yeah, I'll echo, what's been said so far, just saying, figure out what you're about first, to think deeply about, what you want out of a job, what you want out of life, what your priorities are. Then look around and see what's out there, because it is varied. There are as many kinds of data science jobs as there are, firms or organizations, I imagine. So focus on what makes you tick, then think about how to target the areas that are near the top for you. And it'll all work out somehow. You'll be fine. Work your network. You have friends. You have other people who have done this before. I would encourage anyone on this call or in the ASA who wants to chat to me about this. I'm happy to just shoot me an email. As far as whether we're hiring, I think that was on the list of things we were given. But if any of your honors students or master's students are looking for a PhD program in data science, look up the DARE ITTC and or ask me about that as well.
Thanks. Suk Yee?
Yeah, well, for me, I guess takeaway is that go ahead and pursue whatever that interests you. And yeah, I know it's sometimes option for international applicants can be restricted in a sense, but yeah, definitely there is possibility. So don't give up, especially during this time. For me, that's one of the main challenges to find jobs during this time. So, but yeah, definitely there are more jobs that's opening up right now. So yeah, have a look and try to get a sense of what different field or what different type of job that's offered out there. By doing internship, for example, you could get some ideas on whether if data science job are sort of the type of job that you are interested in, or maybe you are or maybe you wanted to stick with academic job for a couple of more years. That's fine as well. But overall, the experience is definitely a thing to consider as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Suk Yee. That brings us to an end of our session. Thank you, Anthea, Jacob, Richard, and Suk Yee for your time. And thank you, everyone, for coming in. Thanks again.